Corals are facing a ton of challenges in the form of human disturbances, and the potential loss of corals and coral reefs will devastate 25% of the species in the ocean that depend on reefs for their survival. But there are efforts to protect and restore populations in the face of challenges such as climate change, water pollution, coastal development, and overfishing. An organization called the Great Barrier Reef Legacy, based in Australia, is working to do a different type of preservation. The organization wants to collect and preserve every species of coral in the Great Barrier Reef along with the genetic diversity of each coral species. The offsite facility that will house the species will act to stabilize their existence in case the wild populations are threatened with extinction and could act as brooding colonies for restoration purposes. We're going to talk about all this on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I am your host, Andrew Lewin. This is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, what you can do to speak up for the ocean, and how you can live for a better ocean by taking action. I am so happy to be here today. I'm pre-recording this because I am probably going to lose my voice this weekend. I've got another hockey tournament to coach, and it's a hockey tournament where I'm coaching not only the team that I'm head coach for, which is my younger daughter, but also the team where I'm assistant coach for, which is my older daughter. And so I will be on the bench, and I am the type of guy. The reason I became a coach, I always tell people, is because I can't stay quiet in the stand. So I might as well do something productive when I'm on the bench as a coach, whether it be a head coach or an assistant coach. And I love spending time with my kids. It's a great way to be on the ice with them and see how they go through sort of adversity and competition and competitive moments. And so it's been really fun. It's been really a really fun journey. But I do yell and scream. All positive, I swear, all positive. But I do tend to raise my voice to cheer, and I tend to lose it. So this is double the time, and so I'm probably going to lose my voice probably after Friday because I will have coached 4 games at that point. So yeah, we'll see how that all works out. Regardless, I'm glad to be here on this episode because I came across this article on Cosmos. A friend of mine, good friend of mine and colleague, soon to be, I'm not going to say it yet, but Melissa Marquez, she's doing her PhD, she's defending soon, but she's a great writer. Not only does she have novels, like fictional novels, a children's book that she just released, but she also writes for Forbes and Cosmos. Just an amazing writer, such a wonderful person. She's been in doing science communication since before I was doing science communication, and she's fantastic at it, and just love her for it, love her articles for it. So I'm covering one of her articles that she wrote, and I'll put the link in the show notes. So if you are looking to find more from her, you can do that. But this one is called Australia's Aim to be Noah's Ark for Corals Worldwide. Imagine that, a Noah's Ark for corals worldwide. You're probably thinking, well, how does that work with corals? Well, the wonderful thing about corals is you can take a colony of corals from the wild, bring them into a tank on land, right? Like a marine tank on land. And if it's set up properly, and everything is right, you can actually cut them into like micro pieces and they will grow back, right? You can fragment them essentially and they can grow back. The marine aquarium industry lives off of this stuff. In fact, it's one way to ensure that we're not taking too many corals from the wild to put into the marine aquarium industry because they can be fragmented so much and so easily. It's something that I've done in the past. It's something that I've seen done in the past. I know researchers have studied this, and they've actually made money on selling the fragments to the marine aquarium hobby so that they can actually fund their research to do more research on this. It's a great way. We also had a guest on a while ago to talk about his book, on sort of how to restore, 1 billion corals, and it was about microfragmenting. So that's the goal for this, but not only just the microfragment, it's to preserve the genetic diversity and species diversity of the corals on the Great Barrier Reef. Now, the Great Barrier Reef is the largest barrier reef in the world. It is a UN World Heritage Site and is one of the most fantastic and spectacular places that I've never been to. Yes, slightly feel sorry for me. It's something that I've always wanted to go as a marine biologist. It's a bit of a bucket list item that everybody wants to go there. However, the Great Barrier Reef for the last number of years has faced a lot of adversity due to climate change. When you have climate change consequences like increased sea surface temperature that can bring the temperature out of the healthy ranges of coral reefs, you get bleaching. And I've talked about bleaching a lot here, so I'm not going to go into that. But you have that effect. Corals will bleach, and if they bleach for long enough, meaning if the sea surface temperature stays hot enough for long enough, the increased number of days, then you'll see a coral die off. The dinoflagellates, the zooanthellae that actually live within the coral reef or within the coral animal will not come back, and because just the conditions aren't good enough for it. It gets too hot for them. So they bounce, and the coral becomes just white skeleton of limestone. Not a fun sight, not a pretty sight. And so if it lasts for long enough, then it can happen. Now, you've probably seen headlines over the past number of years where Great Barrier Reef, 93% of it bleached. It's dead. It's this and that. It's not dead. It recovers. Most of them recover. I believe last time they said 80 some odd percent recover. There's only a few dead spots. It's still very concerning that we're seeing this type of bleaching, this percentage. This amount of cover that's bleached. And because coral reefs are such an important spot for biodiversity of other animals, fish, invertebrates, sea turtles live off there, sharks, I know that's a fish, I understand. Marine mammals will come in every once in a while. It's just a place where a lot of animals like to hang out because there's a lot of hiding spots, there's a lot of food, and those are the two things that make it. And hiding spots and food. Those are the two things that really make it a habitat a lot of fun to hang out in. And it also provides a lot of protection, like coastal zone protection, right? Because it dissipates wave energy as the wave comes across. So, it lessens the effects of erosion and coastal sort of manipulation by waves. So here's the situation now. We're seeing extended bleaching from extended, hot water areas. And so something needs to be done. We're also seeing water pollution, overfishing, things like that. We're seeing sea level rise, which causes, less sun to get across or to get through to the depths that it normally gets to fuel these corals and zooanthellae with sunlight. So there's a lot of challenges that they're facing. And so with that, there's a worry that a lot of these species are going to go extinct, or even some of these species are going to go extinct. And very well from just listening to this podcast, if you listen for any type of time, we've talked about how important biodiversity is. You have coral reefs, especially the stony. So there's two types of coral reefs, really, when you look at the category. There's the hard corals and the soft corals. The hard corals are really the building blocks for coral reefs, provide a lot of the hiding spots, are a little bit more rugged. Soft corals are a little bit more sensitive in terms they can get torn up and things like that. Yes, hard corals can break, but they tend to be the building blocks of good reef habitats. And those are the ones that are really facing, ocean acidification, sea surface temperature. They're the ones who are really facing the problems. And so we're seeing that. And so what this Great Barrier Reef Legacy organization wants to do is take a sample of those species and all the species in the Great Barrier Reef and put them on land in tanks, obviously, and be able to preserve that diversity. One, preserve all the species from a species diversity point of view, and there's about 400 species. And then two, they want to preserve the genetic diversity. So once they collect all the species, and they've collected over 181 colonies, not necessarily species, but colonies. And so what they want to do is once they get all the species, they want to start collecting the genetic diversity. So that means they're going to be collecting the same number of individuals or colonies within the same species, but may have some sort of different genetic diversity, right? Or genetic type of unique attribute. right? Because what we want to do is, with just from a species point of view, the more coral species that we have, the better off, the more stable the reefs are going to be, right? Because if you have a number of species and some of them die off, well, you still have a lot of species ready to still create that habitat, be those building blocks. But if you only have one or two of those species and one dies off, now we're really in trouble, right? Because we only have one. So, if you have 400 species in a coral reef, which is the Great Barrier Reef, it's a lot more resilient than it is if it only has like 5, right? So we are going to be in a position where we need to protect not only the species, but we have to protect the differences within that species, right? Because again, it goes down to, what if some of those different attributes, the genetic diversity, doesn't survive well within a particular adaptation or particular change, and then so it dies off, but other aspects of that species, other genetic diversity aspects of those species will be able to live on. And that's how we keep species moving along. So to be able to collect them in the wild and bring them into a land-based facility is a lot easier than it would have been 20 years ago, because we have the technology through the marine aquarium industry. We have the technology and the know-how to keep a lot of these species alive and in good health. We're trying to find out more and more of those species. 400. I don't know if we have 400 in the database of marine aquarium to say, hey, yeah, we can keep all of these healthy. But when you have researchers, when you have a dedicated facility, and you have people who are their main goal is to keep all these species active and healthy and alive, then you're going to be in a good shape to be able to experiment, to be able to bring in more species without affecting the wild populations, but also preserving those wild populations in case there's another mass bleaching event, right? And we're in the summer in Australia, so it's getting hot. It's getting hot for a long time. And so to be able to protect those Great Barrier Reef corals is going to be extremely, extremely important. So like I said, they're partnering up with the marine aquarium industry, which is really great. We need to have that. Not only is the facility great to hold all of these animals, but it's also carbon neutral. It actually won an award recently called the Global or Energy Globe Awards for its innovative solutions integrating technology and ocean conservation. So and if you think about it, the concept is not difficult. You're taking, the marine aquarium industry know-how and technology, and putting in this, we got to protect the genetic diversity of these corals, so we're going to put it all into a tank. It's genius. Really. It's absolutely genius, because what happens if one of those species are noticeably extinct or extirpated from the Great Barrier Reef? Well, we can use the ones that are in the tanks and fragment them, build them up so they're ready to go back out when the conditions are right, or when the animal is adapted to the right conditions, right? That's what's really important. And one of the quotes here says, education and awareness is an important social aspect when we look at sustainable development. The building's a distinctive sculptural form inspired by mushroom coral will help position it as a beacon for environmental awareness and the center for hope, learning, and wonder. So the actual architecture of the building is quite interesting too. It's built as a coral, a mushroom coral to be exact. And so you're going to be able to go in and visit these corals. You're going to be able to look at them, learn about the coral reefs of the corals of the Great Barrier Reef, look how they form different reefs with different species. I think that's something to be really proud of. And so, like I said, there's hard and soft corals, and so they have to be cared for differently. But the hard corals are often referred to as reef building corals, like the elkhorn coral and the staghorn coral. And they exist in colonies. And their skeletons are composed of calcium carbonate, a substance created by thousands of individual polyps cemented together. The Great Barrier Reef has grown relatively quickly thanks to hard corals, while soft corals provide its food supply. For now, the focus is on preserving hard corals. So that's the focus right now. So they said, while we have the long-term vision to collect soft corals, the immediate goal is to focus on hard corals only. This is quite simple, because without hard corals, there would be no coral reefs. They created the structure. For all of the other living organisms of the reef to thrive on. Explains this as the Great Barrier Reef Legacy Operations Manager Paul Myers. So I just think this was a fun story to share. I think they eventually, when they get to the maximum amount of species that they can get to and the maximum number of colonies, and they have the room, I think this idea, at least, whether or not it may or may not be in the same facility, but the idea will be expanded. The goal is to expand it to other coral reefs around the world, whether that be still in the South Pacific, or whether that be in the Caribbean, or whether that be in the Mediterranean. There's going to be a lot of different sites that this could pop up in, and I can see a really cool franchise from it, or something to happen in that regards. Of course, it'd be hard for corals to be passed around to different coral reefs or these types of land-based areas because of CITES. A lot of these corals are considered threatened with extinction, and they're on Species at Risk Act, and so a lot of them can't be added to this, or a lot of them have been added to CITES, which is a trade regulation which allows or disallows the trade across borders or import of these corals, many of these corals across the borders. So that's really important. But if you have a chance, take a look on in the show notes, click on the link, take a look at what they have going on here in the facility. There's a really great picture of Lyle Squire, Dr. Charlie Veron, and Dr. Dean Miller with living coral fragments at the Legacy Land-Based Institute. This must be worth millions and millions of dollars, and something that I think is just phenomenal. It's just great. They're hoping by 2026, the team hopes to have not only the full living coral biobank facility built, but also collect and maintain 800 species of hard coral. They said once we have the full collection, our fragments will double in size every year and can be fragmented. This means that we have a continuous supply of coral stock that can be used as catalysts for reef research and restoration efforts with no need for additional collections. So they're saving from research collections, they're saving from for experimentation and things like that, and they're just growing everything, and they have this beautiful species diversity. That's it for today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send them to me or DM me on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. That's at How to Protect the Ocean, all one word. You can also email me if you go to speakupforblue.com. Just fill out the contact page or contact us page, and I will be happy to get back to you. But that's it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.